It rings a lot better standing down here than it does standing up there on that podium. Welcome to the November 27th edition of Charlotte Rotary. Trust that you all had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you did. This being Giving Tuesday, be thinking about all of the things that we as Rotarians support, especially Charlotte Rotarians, and do whatever you can to support, continue to support, increase your support for those efforts that we're making. We're going to start with an invocation from Pat Millen.
Thanks, President Mike. Please pray with me. In a world where conflict often appears to be a way of life, we give thanks that as Rotarians, we can reach across so many borders to offer comfort, counsel, and service to those in need. As we lift our voices in prayer, we give thanks that we have the ability to offer our time, our talents, and our fortunes to serve our neighboring men and women. Thus, in one accord, we join in fellowship and ask that this food nourish us and help us better fulfill our commitment to service above self. Amen.
Thanks, Pat. And to introduce our visitors and guests, Roger Serra with his best WFAE announcer's voice.
Best retired WFAE announcer's voice. We're delighted always to have guests here at the Charlotte Rotary. And when I call off your name, if you would please stand and remain standing, and at the end of the list, we'll be glad to give you a warm welcome on behalf of all of us. First of all, hello and thank you to Ahmed Kamel, guest of my colleague, who is club president of Charlotte North. Welcome. Sean Godham, guest of the club, assistant district governor. Welcome to you. Stacy Baum, guest of Kim McMillan. Bill Hamelman, guest of Clyde Robinson. Tim Nicodemus, guest of J.T. Simpson. Roy Lindland, guest of my colleague. Jacob Hoare, guest of Courtney Ramey. Madeline Keeter, also a guest of Kim McMillan. And Valerie Davis, the guest of J.T. Simpson. Thank you very much, and please give them a warm Charlotte Rotary welcome.
Thank you, Roger. And don't sit down yet. If everybody else will get up and stand with us, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and you can be seated. And so our composite committee, co-chaired by Rudy Rudisell, has sent the co-chair up here, Rudy, for some announcements and some interesting perspectives.
Good afternoon. Thank you, President Mike. I said I could speak all afternoon on this, and he says that's not a good idea. So I'm not going to, but this club does so many outstanding projects and everything in the community that's really so positive. And I selected two of them today. I want to talk to you briefly about. You're aware of them, but I want to give you some detail of kind of what was accomplished. First one is the warm clothing project we have, and that's chaired by John Cantrell. John, are you here? And Glenn Booley. And the job here is to prioritize, organize, collect, and publicize warm clothing, and it goes to the benefit of the crisis assistance ministry. We've been involved in that project since 2002. That's 16 years, any way that you cut it. This year, another outstanding year. We've got 3 pickup loads, however much that is, of warm clothing that was sent over to the crisis assistance ministry. And I'd like to ask you to give a round of applause to John and the whole group that was involved in this. Also the people that donated. All those donations for all that warm clothing is from members of this club. The second one I'd like to talk about is the Rotary Scholarship Golf Classic. We've had that for 16 years, since 2002. And all of us are aware of it, but I don't know if we know what's really been accomplished there. And with the help of Sandy, we went back and researched it all these years. First, this year is chaired by Michael Orzek, Michael Wallinger, and Luther Fincher. They're the leaders again, 16 years. This year, this effort, $50,000 was raised in profits, which is outstanding. And I asked Sandy, I said, where do we go, how long we've been doing this? She said 16 years. And over that 16 years, and again, it's for the sons and daughters of first responders, CMPD, fire department, medic, and the sheriff's department. We've had 80 recipients of these awards, amounted to $750,000 over that period of time. Isn't that outstanding? Unbelievable. I'm going to mention two other things under the Golf Classic, and that is we save money by in-kind gifts to the club. Obviously, it's something we don't have to spend. And we had 6 different companies that offered in-kind donations such as food, beer, water, soft drinks, and the like. And you remember the raffle we have, every time you walk in the door, they want money from you, which is a good thing. We had 14 members of this club that were involved and either gave something or went out and secured something there. So outstanding. Again, $750,000 over 16 years. Outstanding. If you can, let's give them a round of applause as well. I'm almost done. He's got a baseball bat, and if you talk too long, wham! So the last thing, shout-outs is something we do here at this club. There's another one. I spent a little time in the military, and there's 2 other things. One that the Army has, the other is the Marine Corps. And the Army sent a shout-out for achievement is, hooah! And at least you're awake now. And then the Marine Corps, silence please. Marine Corps is hoorah! So thank you very much. I'm done.
Want to make sure everybody was awake and oriented, and we did. So we've got a panel that's chomping at the bit to get up here, but we got a couple quick announcements to make. First coming from Sean Gautam, our Assistant District Governor. Sean?
Thank you, President Mike. Thank you, President Mike. Good afternoon. Sorry I'm dressed like this. We planted some trees this morning with fellow members and Rotarians. I'm here to present the 2017-18 Rotary citation from the RI President, presented to the Rotary Club of Charlotte for helping Rotary make a difference in the lives of people all over the world. So this is for the 2017-18 year. Congratulations to your club. And I would present this to your past president, Katie Tyler. I saw Katie here. Yeah. So congratulations. This is signed by Ian Risley, Rotary International President in 2017-18. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Congratulations, Katie. Katie, we'll get your speech next week, if that's okay. Bob Webb going to tell us about Christmas Day breakfast at the Charlotte Rescue Mission.
That's right, President Mike. Thank you. So another one of our great Rotary projects is serving Christmas morning breakfast at the Charlotte Rescue Mission. How many have done that in the past? We've had really good participation. Now is sign-up time. It's something that your whole family can participate in if you would like. So there's a sign-up sheet on your table. You can sign up on the Charlotte Rotary website, or you can just tell Sandy. 2 things we're going to do different than what we've done in the past. This year, we're going to dress it up a bit. So we're asking everybody to wear a white shirt, black pants, and we're going to provide the bow ties so you can look sharp like I do, huh? The second thing is we're going to start about 30 minutes later, so we want you there between 6:15 and 6:30 on Christmas morning. So I look forward to seeing a lot of you there. So please sign up. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Bob. Let's give Bob a big round of applause. It's a lot of work. Okay, so we're going to get going with the program, which, as you know, is a panel discussion on a very important and vexing issue for our community, affordable housing. And we've got 2 panelists, Julie Porter and Ed Driggs, and our moderator today is going to be Maura Quinn. So if you guys could kind of come on up and get situated, I'll introduce Maura real quickly, and she'll say something briefly about Ed and Julie. You know, for those of you that don't know Maura, she's one of the great ambassadors of our region, and she's been that for as long as I can remember. Fortunately, I still can think back and remember quite a ways. When my better half, Catherine, and I moved to Charlotte, we tried to figure out how we could learn as much as we could about the region and absorb what was happening in the region. And we did that a lot of times by dialing into, and you used to have to dial in, to a show called PM Magazine. And it was one of the original talk/feature shows on television. And I must say, Maura, today's talk shows are poor substitutes for the original that she did. Anyway, Maura was producer of that PM Magazine show. She co-hosted it with Bob Lacey. I know many of you remember it. Probably a good number of you don't. But Maura and Bob were windows into Charlotte's DNA for Kathy and me. And it was obvious from watching them what was happening here in our city and why we've accomplished so much since. Once an ambassador, always one. And Maura, fast forwarding through the tape, ended up going to Center City Partners, Charlotte Center City Partners in 2002 as the Chief Operating Officer, where she promotes the economic and cultural development of our urban core. Along her career path, Maura's picked up all kinds of accolades, too numerous to mention, so I'll dispense with that and do my best Bob Lacey impression by first getting out of Maura's way, which he always did, and saying, as Bob did, "Over to you, Maura." Let's give Maura a big round of applause and a Charlotte Rotary welcome.
Thank you, President Mike. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. That was very kind. I appreciate that very, very much. We're so thrilled to be here on behalf of Julie and Ed. I want to start by saying we're so thrilled that you want to hear about affordable housing. This is a really important topic. It's important to all of us here. And I am going to start by assuming that most everyone in this room got up this morning from a warm bed in a safe home that you can afford. You have a door that you can lock. You are not like the tens of thousands in our community whose rent has escalated out of reach or whose taxes have escalated out of reach, so they have lost their housing or they are housing insecure. Housing insecure means you are living on the razor edge of affordability. It means any event could cause you to lose your home. Rent escalation, illness, losing a job, a sick child. And then what happens? Do you go to a shelter? Are you sleeping on someone's couch until they get tired of you and you can find a place again? Are you living with family until they get tired of you and kick you out? This is reality for so many people in our community. Probably not reality for most of the people in this room. And so this is not a reality that we face. It's not something that we think about. Housing in our community is expensive. Now, that's something that we all know. As of October 2018, average rent for an apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina is about $1,400 a month. And that's a 3.79 increase from last year when the rent was $1,346. And it's a 1.79 decrease from last month when the rent was $1,424. Almost $1,400 a month for rent. That's an average. One-bedroom apartments in Charlotte rent for $1,235 a month on average. Now, you can find less, but that's the average. That's from Rent Jungle. Now, you can find really less ones, but Zillow agrees on that rent pricing. Now, that's just rents. According to Zillow, the median home value in Charlotte is $218,900 average. Charlotte homes have gone up 10.6% over the last year. And if you believe Zillow, they predict they will rise another 5.1% in the next year. Now, that's just a little taste of some of the numbers. The good news is that our community is woke. We are woke about affordable housing, and we're doing something about it. And Julie and Ed are on the forefront of doing something about it. Julie is the president of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Housing Partnership. The partnership started in 1989 to finance, preserve, and develop subsidized housing for low-wage earners in and around Charlotte. The housing partnership focused on distressed neighborhoods, including Greenville, Genesis Park, and Druid Hills. Julie is also a member of the Evergreen Team, which is an ad hoc group formed to explore innovative ways to tackle affordable housing and to engage the private sector in this work. And I was basically the staff person for the Evergreen Team, so I know a lot about that. So she's going to talk about that some. We also have City Councilman and Charlotte Rotary member Ed Driggs. Ed is serving his third term representing District 7. Ed is retired, but his career focused on finance. So Ed is the numbers guy. We always rely on Ed for numbers. On City Council, Ed is Vice Chairman of Economic Development, Vice Chairman of Budget, and to the point of today, for all of those things are to the point of today, but to the very single point of today, Ed is Vice Chairman of Housing and Neighborhood Development. So let's begin by getting Ed to frame this issue for us. Ed, can you start by framing the affordable housing issue? Because there are a lot of names, there are a lot of acronyms, there are a lot of different things that come into play when we talk about affordable housing.
Thank you, Maura. I'll do that. First, I'd like to comment, I really have the opportunity to show off these socks to such good advantage, so I hope you
So
appreciate them.
They're so awesome.
This is a very involved subject. I'm going to try in just a couple of minutes to give you a high-level overview of the terrain here. The city has had a policy since 2001 of issuing bonds and putting the proceeds into a trust fund to help finance the construction of affordable housing. That money is used in conjunction with federally funded and state-administered tax programs that cover part of the cost of construction and has resulted in over 5,000 units being created at a cost of over $600 million, about $100 million of which was actually funded by the trust fund. The goal of the city originally was to create workforce housing. We started from the idea that it was just wrong that people like teachers and police officers could work in Charlotte and not be able to afford to live here. So the intention was to provide relief kind of in that space. And in order to kind of give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about next, I should go into a little bit of terminology. A house is considered affordable to a potential tenant or owner if they can pay for the cost of owning the house with 30% of their income. So that's what affordable means. Usually the affordable housing conversation focuses on people with lower incomes who are challenged to find a place to live on 30% of what they earn. And you made reference to the fact that many people actually pay more than 30%, and they are considered to be vulnerable in the sense that that's more than you should have to pay for your housing, and it leaves you unable to cover all of your other costs. So subsidized housing is the type of housing that we create in order to try to provide relief to people in the lower income categories. To define who we mean by that, we use a yardstick, which is area median income. So the area median income in Charlotte for a family of four is something over $70,000, and you'll often hear in affordable housing conversations, we're talking about 60% of AMI or 80% of AMI, and that's a percentage of that $70,000 number. So if we say we want housing to be affordable to somebody at 60% of AMI, you would take 60% of $70,000, which is $42,000 a year as their income, and then you would take 30% of that, which is the amount that they're expected to pay for housing, and that is the cost of housing that we can create with the intention of allowing people at 60% of AMI to live there.
Anybody got a calculator? That's still, it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I want to stick to my notes so I don't go off in the weeds here. But,
No, you're fine, you're fine. It's complicated and hard.
1,050 a month, 42,000 divided by 12 times 0.30, 1,050.
All right. The man with the calculator who knows a thing or two about this.
Edwin had a calculator.
So we just heard that the average is 1,200 or whatever, right? And it turns out that if you're at 60% of AMI, you can afford properly about 1,000 or a little over 1,000. So there's the kind of gap for the 60% that we're trying to fill. Usually when we talk about affordable housing, we're actually talking more If it relates to subsidies, we're talking about people at the kind of 80% and below level. Because at above 80%, there is actually quite a lot of housing available at market prices. As you mentioned, there's a spread above and below that average. So the crunch is down in the levels lower than that. I should mention three things that have happened that have really changed the conversation about affordable housing in recent years. For one, we had a study that we relied on that said that there was a shortage overall of about 34,000 units of affordable housing, which is enormous when you consider that it costs $30,000 to $50,000 per unit to create a new unit of affordable housing. Then we got another study that said, in fact, there is a shortage of about 21,000 units for people below 50% of area median income, and there's a relative abundance of housing as you get up to 80% and above. So the focus kind of shifted to the lower income points. Another thing that happened was the Keith Lamont Scott shooting and the ensuing unrest. So City Council passed a community action plan, one of the focus points of which was to create more affordable housing because we felt that would provide relief that had added to the social pressures creating those circumstances. And I think the last thing I should mention is cities across the country are experiencing the same problem of rents rising much faster than incomes. Incomes have been stagnant for about 10 years. Rents have gone up. So this is a situation that cities everywhere have prioritized. As you're probably aware, Charlotte included in its budget this year a $50 million proposal for bonds, up from the 15 that we had normally done. And that was approved by a large majority of the public in the recent election. In order to make sure that that money is used effectively, we worked in the Housing and Neighborhood Development Committee and on council to create a framework for housing, to get clearer about exactly how we were going to use the money, what the most effective way was to create units, to define what units we wanted to create, and also to try to preserve the naturally occurring housing that we already had. Because what's been going on is rents have been rising and gentrification. Properties are being torn down to make way for new expensive units. So that erodes the availability of accessible housing and is part of our overall plan to try and create more units. One of the primary goals in that framework is we want to create dispersion of housing. We don't want high concentrations of low-income housing in certain areas. So we also have a location policy that says that we will create these units. It used to be kind of a hard brick wall kind of thing. There will be no new affordable units where there are too many existing ones. We realized that that was too limiting and kind of got in the way of pursuing our other goals, which is a greater number of units at more accessible price points. So we've now come up with a new location policy that has a scorecard system for kind of assessing where the best value is in new projects. The last thing I want to mention quickly is the private sector is also participating in this effort, and the Foundation for the Carolinas and the Charlotte Chamber are leading a $50 million initiative on the private side through contributions of land, through putting up cash, through different means. And the efforts of the city and of the private sector will be coordinated by an organization called LISC, which is a consulting group based in New York specialized in things like this. They're showing us new models for creation of affordable housing based on what's been done to the cities, and they've also promised to show us ways to access funds that we haven't been able to use so far. So that's my high level.
And there is a lot in there. We'll dig into more of that in just a minute. So let's go to Julie. Julie,
Sure.
You were a member of the Evergreen team, which was a task force. It was an ad hoc task force that was pulled together with a couple of different missions. One mission was to try to think of innovative ways to tackle the problem of affordable housing, and another mission was to try to figure out ways to bring in the private sector. And Ed mentioned LISC, and so this was another way of trying to bring in the private sector to the conversation. So Julie, can you talk us through the report that came out of the Evergreen team?
Absolutely. If you want to switch to the next slide, and we do have a little bit of a PowerPoint here. Before I start, though, I'm just going to explain a little bit about the Housing Partnership. If you're not familiar with us, we are a nonprofit organization. We've existed in Charlotte. In fact, we're going into our 30th year next year. We really try to address the full spectrum of housing needs in Charlotte. So for people who Ed mentioned are over 80% of area median income, so who maybe earn $55,000 and have a family of 4 or over, we really try to help them with home ownership. So just like this last 2 weekends ago with Wells Fargo, we ran a down payment assistance program. We put $4.3 million out in down payment assistance for first-time home buyers, all of whom were under 80% of area median income. We run a similar program for the city of Charlotte called House Charlotte. So for the home ownership and for 80% and under, we're really looking at that level. What Ed was talking about, that the biggest need is under 50%. We're really looking at that from a rental standpoint. The Housing Partnership develops affordable housing using the state's low-income housing tax program. We also use the City of Charlotte's Housing Trust Fund in order to augment that. As Ed mentioned, it takes about $30,000 in subsidy to develop a single unit of affordable housing. The rest is leverage through loans and also through tax credits, so that there's really good leverage on the city's money. For those who are at 30% of area median income, that's also a rental product. It requires a tremendous amount of subsidy because the cost to develop that unit is about, or actually the cost to maintain that unit on an annual basis is about $4,500. It only brings in about $3,000 in rent. So for every unit at 30%, the lowest of the low that you create, you have to have a balance of other units. So those are two of the things that we do. We also work in certain neighborhoods in Charlotte along Statesville Avenue where we've done a lot of redevelopment work. I was really pleased to be a member of the task force for Evergreen. As Moira mentioned, mission is to come up with some new and innovative strategies where the private sector can really dig in on the affordable housing issue, knowing that if we don't have places in Charlotte, houses, apartments, where workers can locate that are within their price range, we're going to have a hard time recruiting new businesses into Charlotte. And so the private sector has taken this on, and that was its primary mission. The team that came up with the Evergreen was really led by Jim Doolin. If anybody knows Jim, he was head of Spectrum Properties here. He has taken this on as kind of his private initiative, and along with Michael Smith and Center City Partners said, you know what, we're going to look and see how the private sector can help. They brought a task force together that included affordable housing developers like the Housing Partnership, but also had city staff on it. It had county staff on it. It had other stakeholders in real estate development and in law firms. A lot of civic leadership in Charlotte were part of the task force, coming up with these innovative ideas. The belief system for the Evergreen, it was founded around some pillars, basically, saying that we have to be able to have families be stable in their housing. Everybody's heard about the economic mobility issue in Charlotte, that we are 50 out of 50 on economic mobility, that a child born into poverty in a high poverty neighborhood in Charlotte only has a 4% chance of getting out of poverty by the time that they're an adult. That is really rough. We're actually getting into the higher incomes as an adult. That's really difficult, and Charlotte does not score well. So this, again, was something that the Evergreen team thought that they had to address. They also thought that the affordable housing should be throughout Charlotte, that it should be available in every part of Charlotte. It thought that there should be a collaboration among the private sector, the public sector, and the faith-based communities and the philanthropic community. And we had to start now, because if we don't start now, we're already behind. As Ed mentioned, we are short on affordable housing, and we need to start now. And so we're going to talk about the need. Ed really framed this extremely well. What we look at it right now is that 21,000 unit deficit for those who are under 50% AMI, area median income and under, about 35,000 for a family of 4. So that is the deficit that we're trying to help with. Ed also mentioned naturally occurring affordable housing, which is basically apartments that rent for a modest amount. The rents in Charlotte have been seeing 30 to 40% increases over the last few years. And I'll just give you an example. We're looking at an opportunity right now to purchase a NOAA. I know it's a bad acronym, but it's naturally occurring affordable. And its rent has risen from $750 3 years ago to $1,050 today. And the investors are swooping in on this property knowing that they might be even able to get a little bit more upside on that rent. So they're going to be pushing that rent even higher. And what's happening is we're having a lot of displacement of low-income families. And in fact, in the last 3 years, 18,000 units have flipped from NOAA into higher rents so that they're outside of the reach of those 60% in area low-income families. So the Evergreen team worked for a solid year, and they came up with a number of bold ideas. You'll see them on the board. I'm only going to talk about a couple of them. The first one is to form a team that is working on affordable housing. The second is to create coordinated land policies and construction-ready sites. We know that, like the city, the county, the school district, and others, faith-based organizations, have land. But that land needs to be consolidated and it needs to be proactively zoned so that affordable housing developers can get in there and purchase it and begin developing affordable housing quickly. Bold idea 3 is to create a charitable investment fund, and it marries with bold idea 4, which is recruit and facilitate a social impact capital. Ed was talking about the fact that the Foundation for the Carolinas is trying to develop a $50 million fund to match the City of Charlotte's $50 million housing trust fund. They've already, I think, garnered quite a few. I don't think they're ready for any announcements or anything like that, but I know that they've got at least $10 million that has already been committed to that fund. And we're going to be able, affordable housing developers are going to be able to use that for capital, equity capital, at very low interest rates to marry with the Housing Trust Fund bond and tax credits in order to get our projects moving. That's something that was recommended in this report that came out a few years ago that has already seen a tremendous amount of traction. The other ideas are to simplify processes. That's in process at the city and the county. To acquire and preserve naturally occurring affordable housing, and to expand some creative financing tools such as TIF. And then I think the last one is the challenge that you've probably actually thought about today, because we've been talking in acronyms, and we talk about area median income, and we talk about it as affordable housing. And sometimes people have in their head what affordable housing looks like today, and it is not what is being built today as affordable housing. And I think everyone feels that we need to find better language for affordable housing, because it just doesn't convey what stability means to families. Families who don't have a roof over their head, who are worrying about how they're going to put a meal together for their kids, are not thinking about how they're going to get ahead in life. They're thinking about the roof over their head. And so we have to solve that in Charlotte right now. So those are the bold ideas, and hopefully I've covered them fairly well.
You did indeed. So let's talk for a second. I'm very interested in NOAA, which is the naturally occurring affordable housing. It seems to me, and it seems maybe to others, that might be some of the easiest housing. It seems to me the housing you have is the least expensive housing to keep, rather than building housing from the ground up, taking housing that you have and figuring out how to keep it. What is there a plan to do that? What is the difficulty? What are the barriers in doing that? Because I think there probably are barriers. So Ed, would you like to talk about that?
Yes. The barriers basically are that this is privately owned real estate, right? And the owners are entitled to charge whatever the market will bear, and they're entitled to sell if somebody finds a better use at that location. So what we have to do as a matter of policy, if we want to protect and preserve that housing, is essentially buy it and put deed restrictions on it, which turns out to be actually a cost-effective solution as well, because instead of creating shiny new units, you're taking very livable but older facilities and you're refurbishing them, and then you're putting in place a deed restriction, which is how this works. So when you talk about affordable housing, what you're saying is, I'm going to make an investment, and I'm going to associate with that investment the requirement that this housing be sold or rented at rates that are accessible to somebody at X, Y, or Z level of income. So one of the cornerstones of our housing framework is to try to protect the stock we have of affordable housing, also with an idea of preserving the character of neighborhoods. Like some of the neighborhoods where this affordable housing occurs embody old Charlotte. And it's kind of sad to see them destroyed. So that is a piece of what we're doing. It does require investment because you have to buy, to refurbish, and then to re-let with those deed restrictions.
Julie?
Yeah, and I'll just mention it from a kind of a developer standpoint and an investor. Where we have struggled with NOAA is just competing. I would never ask anybody who is a private, real estate owner to take anything less than what the private market is going to garner for that unit. That's just not fair. So that means I, as an affordable housing developer, need to be able to compete on that playing field. I need to be able to bid for that property that might be on the market as if I was going to raise the rents. And then I can't raise the rents. Because if they're saying, well, look, there's an upside, there's $200 a month upside in every single one of these apartments with just a minimal amount of investment. And so I'm going to bid maybe 20% or 30% more than what the current rent structure would garner. So then me as affordable housing developer, I have to bid as if I was going to do that. But because of my mission as a nonprofit organization, I want to keep rents level. I even want, in some cases, to lower them so I can serve a few of those units at 30 to the lowest of the low incomes. So what that's going to require, and I think that the city of Charlotte is probably prepared for this, is it is going to require some subsidy from the city, hopefully not as much as a brand new unit. Because what we're looking at is, hey, if we can just put 10,000 into these, they will be highly livable for a number of years. Most of them have a lot of useful life left in them. And then, you know what happens? At the end, if the apartments need to be torn down 15 years from now, 20 years from now, I still own the land. And I can create more affordable housing. I think it's an incredible opportunity. I think it's going to be tough. But we're up for it. We've got bids in on 3 of them currently.
I have other questions, but I imagine you have questions too, and I'm cognizant of the time. I know 1:30 is when we all turn to pumpkins, so yes, sir.
In the meantime, while we're trying to rush to service the needs that affordable housing face with, what are you guys familiar with Community Link?
Yeah, we're a nonprofit. We do several of the same things. That we have a home ownership center that does foreclosure prevention, and then we also help seniors with tax abatement, and then we do home buyer counseling and down payment assistance.
About 7 or 8 years ago, Jack Kemp was here, and he spoke at a Community Link fundraiser breakfast. But he also visited the operation one afternoon, and he spent several hours over there, and just learning about what they did. His statement was that this should be a national model for helping people with affordable housing problems. So I just, sometimes we have the answer, not the whole answer by any means, but part of the answer right here in front of us. So I just, while we're trying to figure out and sounds like you guys are, they're doing a great job. But, Community Link, they're doing it right now. I mean, on a daily basis, as far as helping people, as you said, through education and counseling and things like that, putting them in, units. And, but like anybody else, they need to be funded, so.
Correct.
With this extra $50 million bond, maybe we can get some of that money.
Well, I think, Ed, I'll let you talk about the bond. I'm going to talk about some of the.
And a new pair of socks. Not with the money.
I'm just going to talk for a second about the other nonprofits that address this issue, because we have such a tremendous network of nonprofit organizations, all of which cover parts of it. Crisis Assistance Ministries, they do rental assistance on a case-by-case basis when people are at risk of eviction. There are others who are out there doing foreclosure prevention. Habitat for Humanity, who helps keep people in their homes through rehab. There's the tax abatement program. I would, if you're interested in supporting this work, find out which organizations, and goodness knows I'm going to speak for my own, I think we do a tremendous job, but you know what, there's a bunch of us out there that are addressing some part of the housing needs in Charlotte. Find them, support them, they are worth your time, they are worth your money.
And chances are there's no one that can do it all.
No.
So here, other questions over here. Let's see, right here, sir.
Ed, can you speak to, with all the apartment development that's gone on, I have a little confusion as to what didn't happen, because this is not a new problem, what our government did or didn't do with all the housing and apartment developments. Why wasn't the government more proactive, and have they taken steps for the new development along the light rail lines and the other lines to encourage these, urban areas to be more than like a 10% or whatever? Can you speak to that topic?
I can tell you that there is a balance that has to be struck, and as a guy who basically favors smaller government and free enterprise, we don't want to interfere with the economic engine that has made Charlotte so successful and has caused our rapid growth. So yes, I think as we discuss our options on council, we recognize there are some things we might have done sooner, especially along the Blue Line corridor, to ensure that those sites would be available to people who would benefit the most from the rapid transit, instead of becoming basically places for millennials to live at high rents. But it is a balance, and what we're trying to do now is we're doing things like using land that the city owns, and to see if we can contribute that as a way, some of it in good locations, favorable locations, and also work with private investors on a number of different models that have been brought to us, in fact, by private sector investors to create public-private partnership type of structures where we can, instead of kind of interfering with the workings of the market, harness that energy for our benefit. So there's a range of choices we could have made. I personally think that it is better for us to pursue a path where we make an investment like the one we're making, and we're responsive to the needs of the people in the worst situation. But, I used to visit Eastern Europe, to take an extreme illustration, and somewhere along the line, you don't want to have a number of city planners and elected officials controlling the entire development of your city.
More of a comment, not really a question. I've been in the residential mortgage business for almost 22 years, and I don't think our industry has done a very good job to really serve the market on a purchase that you guys are talking about. I know we talked about rents and that sort of thing, notwithstanding Cal Charlotte, North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, some other things. But and I don't know what the answer is, but I think our industry has done a very poor job helping those people in those scenarios.
I could just comment on that. I think there's some truth to that, but the city has to be careful, and I have these conversations with my colleagues all the time, We can't impose unilaterally a burden on certain people to do things that are not consistent with their best business practices. So, right. So I think the right answer, though, is right now, because of the recent activity and the chamber and everything else, the desire on the part of businesses to pay attention and see if there is something they can do without compromising the interests of their shareholders is greater than it has been. And we're hoping to see new opportunities for public-private cooperation that include, for example, education of tenants, so that if you have a loss ratio problem because of non-payment of rents and so on, Habitat works for a long time before somebody moves into a house to kind of make sure that they're financially smart and that they are going to be good obligors on their mortgages.
I just kind of echo that sentiment. I think they do a tremendous job, Habitat does. I do think there are businesses now that are really looking at this from a standpoint of, can we, as an independent business, help our employees get into a house? Maybe instead of, tapping into the City of Charlotte's down payment assistance program, they can create their own down payment assistance program for their employees. I've seen a few that are happening in other states that are doing that, big employers, and it's not just in the West Coast states, it's everywhere, that are saying, you know what, my employees have to live here too.
Okay, final question for Mark.
I wonder if either or both of you could comment on your position with regard to the tiny homes. You're probably familiar with Vail, Arizona, which is building tiny homes for the teachers, firefighters, and you share your thoughts.
Well, it's funny. I just came back from Savannah a couple of weekends ago, and they've got a tiny home project, 22 homes for veterans, that I actually toured. That was, I think, a very good model. Very difficult, more difficult than they thought it was going to be. I don't think it's, a solution for everybody, because, of course, families in a tiny home don't necessarily mix. But for a veteran population, single veterans, formerly homeless, single folks who are low income, I think it's an option. The zoning is probably one of the more intractable issues there, trying to get that through the city, because it's not standard. That would be my
And I would say, in fairness, there are actually some real challenges as you get further and further into the detail about these things, how to do the electricity and the plumbing, what kind of land use. And there are abuses that have occurred where it was permitted. So we have had a discussion on council. I would say the topic is still alive, but the questions came up that we weren't able to answer, so we haven't moved ahead yet.
So thank you all for your questions. I'm going to ask, by way of wrapping up our panel, if both of you could answer, just by way of finishing up and wrapping up, is there anything that you would suggest to everyone in the room, what things they might do, what things they might think about doing? How might they participate in this affordable housing matrix?
We didn't really talk too much about the NIMBY issue, the not in my backyard issue, but it remains a problem in Charlotte. Whenever we have, we had the more difficult rezoning out in the Weddington/McKee Road area that is still in litigation. And I think any time that people are worried about affordable housing coming into their community, if there could be another community of voices that comes out and says, wait a minute, I've seen affordable housing. That's not what it looks like. We absolutely do need to solve the problem of economic mobility. We do need workers of all incomes in Charlotte. If we had a lot of voices in support of our work, I think that would really help.
And I would add to that, you need to be clear about the distinction between Section 8 housing, which is the Charlotte Housing Authority, right? It's a federal program aimed specifically at people at the 30% level. None of what we've talked about today is that. So a lot of people in their minds have this sort of confusion about these developments, housing developments, and public housing, et cetera. The housing that we're creating is for people that have jobs, are capable of paying rent, and there's no presumption that they are going to be bad neighbors. So there is a PR issue. My first week on council, I ran into it big time because the Weddington Road rezoning came up, which was a proposal that Julie knows a lot about in District 7. The other thing I would suggest is take this conversation out to where you work, people you know, and be a part of the energy that is growing around the affordable housing subject. It's not a partisan question. It's something for the social health of our community, and I just hope that you'll get on board. Thank you.
And I would ask you to take a look at that picture. That's affordable housing, right there. That is what affordable housing looks like. So on behalf of Julie Porter, Ed Driggs, I'm Maura Quinn. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you again. Perfect timing, Maura. You've done it again. PM Magazine, alive and well. Anyway, thank you very much. This has been most instructive, and I think is going to help all of us move the ball a little bit more than we could have before. So thanks you. Next week, we've got Carol Folt, the Chancellor of UNC Chapel Hill, coming to visit with us. So make sure that you're here for that. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.